SportsEthos production, where we look at the Seahawks from every angle every week. I'm your host, Candace Higgins.
And I'm Tino Ganasius.
And we are here to discuss the Seahawks' new appointment of their head coach. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to get into. So I think we're just going to dive into it. We've been long waiting. It's been, 3 weeks, Tino? Almost a month? That we've been waiting on this head coach appointment, and the Seahawks ultimately decided on Mike MacDonald, who was one of my top choices from the very beginning. So I'm very excited about that. But before we get into my thoughts, Tina, I'm eager to hear what you think. What was your reaction when everything was announced, and sort of what did you think about the process that it took to get to this point?
10 out of 10. John Schneider, ownership, the choice. I could not be happier as a Seahawks fan. It's refreshing, especially after, covering the Mariners and fans being so irate with the ownership all the time and the front office all the time. This was unbelievable. So he was my number one choice. You know me, I love defense. I love running the ball. I love ball control, all that craziness. And he's in the defensive sense, hiring a defensive minded coach and trying to be ahead of the curve, especially in a division with a Sean McVay and a Kyle Shanahan. I love it. And I have always felt like John Schneider was a defense first sort of dude. And so to me, that part is unbelievable. Secondly, you've got an ownership or an owner and an ownership group that is willing to pay a first-time coach more money than any first-time coach has ever received. And that's unbelievable as well, that they were willing to do that. And the third thing, the biggest thing to me was, I guess, the nuts that John Schneider had to be able to wait out Mike MacDonald and understand, this is my guy, this is who I want, and I'm going to watch other teams hire other candidates who would be good candidates for this team, and wait with the confidence, knowing that was their guy. And so when you identify someone in that way, and you are that much after this particular mind, this particular leader, this particular personality, there's conviction there, and that's what you want to see. Where versus, say, the Commanders' hire of Dan Quinn, there's no conviction there to me, right? They got left holding the bag, basically, or playing musical chairs, and they're the one without the chair. I just so incredibly impressed with how the process went, with the fact that they were willing to give him the bag. And as we've talked about, Mike MacDonald has coached for both Harbaughs, was the D coordinator at Michigan in 21. Obviously, that's my alma mater. That's my team. And he really was the architect for this current Michigan defense. Jesse Minter was our DC the last 2 years, but MacDonald's the one who designed it. And we'll get into it later. There's some similarities between the Baltimore construction and the Michigan construction that I think he's going to try to carry over to Seattle, which means some roster churn. But man, I am a defensive coach, a leader. It's refreshing. And that's the best word for it for me, is refreshing. I'm excited. I'm ready to go. What about you?
Yeah, I'm over the moon. I am absolutely over the moon for a couple of reasons, because the Seahawks have done some things that I just didn't think they would have the nerve to do, starting with letting go of Pete Carroll, which I understand was a completely difficult choice, but I also thought it was a necessary choice. And of all the years, I think this is one of the best coaching cycles in terms of available options that you could possibly have. Like, the options, no matter what type of coach you were looking for, were limitless. And I think they did, like you said, a great job of going through and not just being set. Yes, they had a guy in mind, but I really think they went in with sort of an open mind, being, getting and talking with different people who were at different stages. They interviewed a pretty diverse, I think, group of people. I think they were just looking to pick brains and get ideas and really just be meticulous about the process. Yes, to some extent, I'm sure they were doing some things waiting on Mike MacDonald and Ben Johnson, who I think we forget was also a candidate. Even John Snyder in his introductory presser with Mike MacDonald mentioned that both, I don't think they pretended that Ben Johnson wasn't also a hot candidate. And, so many people assumed from the very beginning that it was Dan Quinn's job to lose. And to me, that would have just been a little bit disappointing, because it would have seemed like a just sticking with what's familiar, right? Like not wanting to let go of the past. Dan Quinn has done a great job overall, despite his loss to the Green Bay Packers, a great job overall of showing that he can, lead defenses and things like that. But I also think that you wanted them to at least address something new. And I know for me, there was some initial concern when there wasn't a Mike MacDonald on the interview list. And they did interview Ben Johnson. They did get that in, but I was just getting a little nervous that they weren't fully looking into their options at least. Like, no, I can live with any choice as long as you are open and explore all of the options on the table. They did that and ultimately were able to do that. I guess the dominoes fell their way in a way that allowed for them to still, like you said, be able to wait out Mike MacDonald, the only guy other than, well, they'd already met with Ben Johnson once, the only guy who they really hadn't had the chance to meet with.
Right.
And for them to, I tweeted out earlier that always compete still lives on, because Mike MacDonald had an offer on the table from the Commanders, man. It wasn't just a Seahawks decision to make, and they had to go in there and compete, and they were willing to throw the bag at him and, show him all the things that they had in common. It seems like they really sold him on what the program is right now and what it could be with him, more so than the Commanders. So you're either competing or you're not.
Right.
And John Snyder's still out there competing. So I agree with you. 10 out of 10 process, 10 out of 10 head coach. Now, I did prefer slightly, would have loved if Ben Johnson had not withdrew himself from contention. I think he still would have been my number one, just because of the continuity factor in terms of how hard it is to keep a good offensive coordinator on your staff, even if you pick one. That turnover is not ideal. That's sometimes troublesome, but I think we cross that bridge when you get there. But I would rather have the best candidate who just happens to be a defensive coach,
right,
than just getting an offensive guy like a Mike Kafka just because he's an offensive guy. You want to feel like you got the best guy, and they absolutely did that slam dunk.
So two things I want to add. One is the fact that in his introductory press conference, he talks about being multiple. He talks about not being predictable, right? Now we were playing checkers and everyone else is playing chess. We were trying to play the same vanilla defense over and over again. You and I go round and round about zone versus man and all that.
Yep.
We got our guy as far as that stuff goes, right? Which is amazing. And my understanding is he's going to call plays, which is amazing.
Yes.
The bigger thing for me, the biggest thing, I guess, is, again, being a Michigan alum, Jim Harbaugh being the guy for me, and seeing the success that John Harbaugh's had. The thing that gives me so much confidence in Mike MacDonald is he's learned from two very, kind of CEO type of head coaches in the Harbaugh brothers, right? And
right.
That's who he came up with. He was with Harbaugh since, 2014. He was with the Harbaugh from 14 on. Right. And those are two of the biggest, I guess, best leaders, overarching leaders of organizations that you can learn from. And, I say that with bias, but I also am saying that, knowing that that's the truth, right? There's a reason why Jim was given so much money and so sought after to go to the Chargers. So, can Mike MacDonald be that guy? That's yet to be seen, because he's always been a coordinator or a position coach. But the education is there, right? The having a role model or having a mentor to teach you how to be that CEO. He's been in that kind of situation now for 9 years. And I love that. I do wonder, I've heard all the player testimonials about how incredible of a coach and a man and a leader he is, right? You see all the quotes from the Ravens players. But what's interesting to me is he's not, he didn't play college football, and he is a finance guy, right? And he did get his master's in sports management. But this is similar to baseball. You see these really brilliant minds kind of coming into coaching and coming into front offices, when previously a lot of it was former players. And he fits that mold, being as young as he is and being as smart as he is. But I don't know. Back to my original 2 points. The idea that he's going to play different defenses is like such a breath of fresh air, I know, for both of us. Yes. And the fact that he learned from great CEO leaders and coaches in the Harbaugh brothers is really, 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 to me, this could not have been, there is no better hire than him. I understand the Ben Johnson argument. I like it. But the fact that we brought in a defensive brain to counter the offensive minds that are in the NFC West is him, plus John Schneider's ability to acquire talent, plus the talent that's already in that defense. Man, I'm already juiced and ready to go.
Yeah, I think those are good points. I think, I agree with you. I'm not sure if he will end up being the CEO type, but at least he understands what that looks like. And I think if nothing else, I agree. Like, he can bring certain elements of that. Mm-hmm. Like, it's almost like the best of both. He might fit more into the X's and O's guy, which I'm completely fine with. In fact, I embrace that. I'm ready for that. Mm-hmm. But, and that was what always attracted me to him as overall coach, knowing that he knows what a first-class organization looks like, coming from a place of stability, mm-hmm. of structure, and not being worried about him bringing, sometimes people just bring dysfunction with them because they're used to dysfunction. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's nothing that they intend to do, but they just only know this way. And so if you had come from a Commanders or it's an organization that really had struggled, you wonder, how is this guy going to, you learn what not to do, but sometimes you accidentally do some things and make some mistakes. And he knows nothing but stability and excellence. And so I think that's a great point. And I think he will bring that. It seems like that sort of ingrained in who he is. He didn't mention mm-hmm. those words in his introductory press conference, excellence or structure, but the way with which he carries himself, mm-hmm. The message with which he brings when he talks about vision and talks about caring for the players and mm-hmm. talks about playing the right way and the hard work that it's going to take to get where they want to go. It really just seems like it's built into really all the things that will make him a good coach or bad coach. We'll see. But it's ingrained in him. And I think that those are positive things mm-hmm. that if you're looking for, obviously it's not football time, so we won't know to the products out there on the field, but there are encouraging signs mm-hmm. along the way. I was worried. I think one of the things I was concerned about was these players are used to a player's coach. Mm-hmm. And that the roster is going to be, there's going to be quite a bit of continuity, I think. John likes his roster. And I think there's a lot of reason to like this roster, to be quite honest, and talent in terms of talent and a good combination of youth. And so because of that, was the guy going to come in and be, just, super strict and the opposite of Pete and trying to we're going to be everything Pete wasn't. And I think there are a lot of elements about what Pete does that resonated with the players that I feared. If another guy comes in like a Mike Vrabel, for example, sure. comes in and tries to lay down the law and this is the way we're going to do things. And, I just wondered, would that rub some of the players the wrong way? Would that lead them off to a bad start in terms of winning over the locker room? And mm-hmm. so it really was encouraging to hear him mention the players so much, because even if he's not playing DJ music in practice like Carroll was, right? Even if he's not doing that, the guys need to feel like he cares about them. Right. And I think even though he does it in a different way, it will still go far with them if the heart and the compassion is still there. And
that's what resonated with me when you listen to, Patrick Queen and some of the other guys on the Ravens talk about him, right? Was that he's invested in them and that you're getting such a great leader. And I had the same fears. I still do have some of the same fears, that Pete Carroll was so beloved mm-hmm. and was so, I don't think he was laid back. I think he allowed people room to express themselves and be themselves. Yeah. And it is really hard to transition from, even in my own job, like when I moved to another position and someone took over for me, there's difference in styles and there's difference in priorities. And sometimes that transition isn't great. And so I still will eyeball that a little bit and worry about that a little bit. We may see a couple of players, that we didn't expect to leave or to have to struggle with it, because I think that always happens in transition. But you're right. The way in which he invests in his players is different than Pete Carroll, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's any less or that it's any less effective. One thing that, if we can dive in a little bit, one thing I find fascinating is I pulled up the defensive roster and lineup depth chart of the Ravens this season. And then I looked at the roster from the 21 Michigan defense. And for one, I think this idea that, I kept talking about not wanting to re-sign Jordan Brooks and small linebackers and coverage and all those things that we would talk about. But those are the defenses. He's run defenses with two small inside linebackers consistently, right? Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith are undersized. Mm-hmm. And so I'm very, very interested to see what John Schneider does with either re-signing Brooks or, what that defense looks like from a middle linebacker standpoint, because MacDonald understands how to build coverages with that kind of personnel. And the other part of this is, and then I'll be interested to hear your response, is he's always had an absolute monster at nose tackle, right? It was Mozzie Smith at Michigan, 6'3", 326 when he was at Michigan, first round pick of the Cowboys. It's Michael Pierce with the Ravens, who's 345 pounds, right? With 2 300-pound defensive ends on either side. He believes it's clear that his defense is predicated on that big, anvil, squatty nose tackle taking up space to keep those linemen off of his smaller inside linebackers. What do we do with Jarran Reed? Do you think he's going to try to continue this scheme? What happens with the inside linebackers that were on the team last year? What do you think? Are you excited? Do you think he's going to try to bring that same scheme to the Seahawks?
No, I think he'll bring certain elements. But one thing he was clear on in his introductory press conference, which I liked a lot, and I think it went under the radar of sorts, but he would not commit. He even specifically said, what we did in Baltimore scheme-wise isn't necessarily what we're going to do here, because I need to find out what we do well. And to me, that says he's really going to build it around the skill sets of his players. And we've been clamoring for that on both offense and defense for years. And so that was extremely refreshing. I think, like you said, there are certain elements that I can see commonalities blending together, but I don't necessarily know that I think he's smart enough to make it work no matter what the personnel is to accent, because we all felt like, I know I for sure felt like the personnel we had last year could have been put in better positions, even with the Bobby Wagners. Did he have to be on every snap? Were there certain snaps you can take him off and put a guy who's in a more advantageous skill set? So I think Mike MacDonald can work with it regardless what they did with Jordan Brooks, Bobby Wagner, Jarran Reed. Now I will say with the Jarran Reed thing, as well as he played with nose tackle, as well as he played at nose tackle last year, that's not his natural position. So I don't think that necessarily because he wants a big, giant nose tackle, that precludes Jarran Reed per se from coming back and just being the 3-tech. It's not, really a lot of the guys on the defensive line playing nose were 3-techs. So, so maybe he comes back, maybe he doesn't, but I don't think that's something Mike can't work around. They may just draft or plug in big nose tackle here.
Right.
Then
that would be my expectation would be that Reed and Jones each play that big D tackle or that big D end, 3-4 D end, and then they bring in a bigger body. Right. They're already talking about like Byron Murphy out of Texas or Tavondre Sweat out of Texas, who's like 360 pounds, right? This huge behemoth of a guy. I agree with you. I think he's going to make the best of what he has and understand the talents that he has, specifically, I think, on the corners and with Mafe. Yeah. But what I do think you whether you're trying to be multiple or not, you still revert back to the things that have worked in the past, right? You may morph them into something slightly different, but the idea is he had a top 10 defense at Michigan. He's had top 10 defenses at Baltimore, and he's going to come in and say, okay, this personnel works, this doesn't. Let's try to do this. Let's pull and push from here and there. But I still think when I look at these rosters, I still see a really big dude in the middle. And I see I see outside linebackers who are hybrid outside linebacker defensive ends, right? Aiden Hutchinson, Owe, Jadeveon Clowney, right? You see these big rush ends that are basically athletic enough to play stand-up outside linebacker. Mm-hmm. I think we see those elements. I think the differences with MacDonald and how he changes is that his coverages, his schemes are going to be different. But I think the size of the personnel and the makeup of the personnel stays pretty similar.
Yeah, I think so. And the middle linebacker thing will be interesting because Patrick McQueen is a free agent. Do they just sub out Jordan Brooks for Patrick McQueen? I don't know. I will say this, though. I know a lot of people want Jordan Brooks back. Mm-hmm. I still lean in the camp that while he did pretty well in coverage last season, that I think it was a contract year. And I think that was more of a outlier than a realistic consistency. Mm-hmm. I'm not really willing to pay $15 million for what's been a question mark on him for 3 years.
Right.
For something that he barely passed last year, and that is coverage. Even though they are undersized interior linebackers, both Bobby or Khan, all those guys, they have all that in common. Mm-hmm. I still think the thing that separates them is coverage ability and foot speed. That I think we'll see.
And what does the eye test say about Brooks, right? Brooks may have graded out okay in coverage this season, mm-hmm. but the eye test to me said otherwise. The eye test to me said he was trailing all the time, right? And that even when he dropped back in zone, they were just chucking it just over him because he's not tall enough, right? He may have graded out okay, but to me, it didn't look like he could cover anything.
He did a lot better than he's done in the past. Historically, he's been one of the worst coverage linebackers in the NFL. Mm-hmm. So relatively speaking, he did a much better job, closer to average. I think is where he ultimately ended up falling. And I will say this, maybe it's a matter of, I've always thought he was better in man situations in terms of coverage than he was zone. I mean, he's terrible in zone. Right. Really, no question about that. So then do they decide that's a redeemable quality worth bringing him back for? Mm-hmm. I don't know, but I will say in general, I think in this day and age, I'm not super big on paying double-digit millions to linebackers at this point. And like I've seen enough of that. Like I think I'm over that. I'd rather put double-digit, put that money on the defensive line and really improve that. Not to say that they haven't made a step in the right direction with that they have with the Leonard Williams, seeing what they're going to do with that, with Draymond Jones. I think they've made some moves to move in that direction, but I don't think bringing Jordan Brooks is worth the $15 million. I mean, if I want to do that, I'd rather do it on a Patrick McQueen who we know works in the system versus Jordan Brooks, who it is a question mark. Can he work in this new system? And it's interesting because those careers have always been compared because they were drafted back to back. And I think there was an argument that I think that Baltimore wanted Brooks, and so Brooks, they ended up with McQueen, and they've always just been compared and contrasted, and it would be funny if that ultimately they ended up making that move. But I think that is one of the most exciting things about this offseason is to see what personnel decisions they make. It's going to shed some light on how outside people have viewed the defense, but it's also going to shed some light on who were Pete's guys, who were John's guys. I think we're going to find that out quickly, too.
Well, you wonder, like Kyle Hamilton was an all-pro. I don't know if he was all-pro, but he played like an all-pro for sure.
Yeah.
And, he was their kind of big chess piece that they could move him around at safety. Seahawks don't have that when you compare, defenses. Seahawks have much better corners than I know Marlon Humphrey's reputation. The reality is Seahawks talent at corner is better. So you wonder what, I think like you said, the personnel choices are going to be fascinating. I really want to see what that defense looks like. Question for you. I'll answer to. So Ryan Grubb, the University of Washington offensive coordinator this year that followed Kalen DeBoer to Alabama, who was offered the Alabama OC job under Saban before last season, is rumored to be the top candidate to be the Seahawks' new offensive coordinator. From what I read, he loves Seattle. His family loves Seattle. They're not into being in Tuscaloosa. If he's the offensive coordinator, the new offensive coordinator for the Seahawks, he was super creative in the passing game, took a ton of deep shots, a lot of misdirection, was able to make I would say, an average running back, 1,000-yard rusher. And he had Michael Penix as his trigger guy. Do you have an opinion about Ryan Grubb? Do you have thoughts about what you want this offense to look like in 2024?
I'll be honest. So I don't watch much college football. I really don't watch college football at all. I think I did the most I did was the year we were going to draft a quarterback, or it was suspected so maybe the past couple of years I've been watching it more than just to keep up with the quarterback.
Yeah.
Carousel, but not super familiar with. I've done some research, seeing what he's like. I think it's an intriguing idea. I'll say that much. I'm not sure about the nuances of, I can't dictate what I loved about his game and what I didn't love about the way he calls plays and things like that.
Sure.
I will say though that there's another, I gotta find the name, make sure I get this name right. But there's another candidate that I'm interested in, to the passing game coordinator for the Lions. Tanner, I'll find it.
Yeah, yes, the young guy.
Yeah, Tanner. But anyway, the passing game coordinator for the Lions. I think it's an interesting contrast. I actually kind of like that idea slightly more, just because I think you could get a little bit of Ben Johnson without getting Ben Johnson, in the sense of he's worked with the same personnel. I mean, we've already talked about how the Lions roster and how the Seahawks roster offensively at least really mirror one another. I think also that's the guy they credited with working a lot with the tight ends, and we've seen what Sam Laporta has done this year. And so that's impressive, knowing that they need to sort of mold somebody else, I think, to be a breakout tight end in order to be cost effective, because, those contracts are, I think Noah Fant's gone. I think you got Will Disley maybe, and I'm sure they can retain Kobe Parkinson if they wanted to. But I'm interested in, even though that guy hasn't played calls. So Grubbs have played calls, but he just hadn't done it, call plays, but he just hadn't done it at the NFL level, right? That's a question. The passing game coordinator has not called plays, but he's worked with NFL personnel.
Right.
I think I lean the NFL experience, because you've already got Mike MacDonald being so young and, still trying to figure things out. I think it would be helpful for him to have somebody who at least knows how to relate and work with NFL players on the offensive level. I think I prefer that slightly, just in a vacuum. But again, that's without knowing the nuances of Grubb's game per se.
I'll tell you what. So I like a lot of what Detroit does. I think that Detroit's secret sauce on offense, obviously there's talent, but I think that that offensive line is what makes them go. Ryan Grubb, I watched all the UW games this year too, and I'm telling you right now, the dude is, if we're looking for creativity, we're looking for, being able to trade, to counterpunch with the offenses of McVay and in the NFC West. This dude is the real deal. And some of the creativity with the passing route, or with the receiver routes at the University of Washington, coupled with the arm strength of Penix, it was phenomenal to watch. They're playing a different sport, right? It's like watching the Lakers in the 80s run up and down the court and no one know what to do with them. That's a lot of what Grubb was doing. I also think it speaks volumes that this coach that was with Kalen DeBoer in whatever it was, North or South Dakota, whatever it is, and ends up at Washington for 1 year, is now the top choice of Nick Saban at Alabama after 1 year at Washington. To me, that speaks to his mind. to me, that speaks to his schemes. Now, you do have to ask the question, kind of, you pointed this out a little bit, is you bring in this, younger, both candidates are young, but you bring in this dude from college. Is he going to command the respect of the offensive, the room, right, in meetings and things, because he's coming from college and he's younger? I don't know the answer to that. You couple him with Mike MacDonald. Is that a recipe for disaster in that they're so young and so green? I don't know. What I do know about Grubb is that Washington offense ate everyone alive outside of Michigan, right? And it was very talented. You had a first round left tackle, you had a first round wide receiver, you have a late first round quarterback, but he did everything he could with that talent. And I'd be happy. I'd love it. I think he's brilliant. I think he's absolutely brilliant. And I hope they bring Penix with them.
It's something I heard that Seahawks Brandon Nelson, he's a YouTube guy on Seahawks, and I follow quite a bit of his stuff, and he brought up this point with Grubbs in the sense of like their things were so scripted, right, to the point that I think he points at this play where like Michael Penix has to throw the ball to a receiver who's already tripped and hit the ground in the grass, right? Because like that's how scripted it is. That's how there really aren't a lot of read concepts involved in that. And coming from a world where that's really what you do and that's what you thrive in, that's not how things work in the NFL. Reading, being able to read, having a more, I guess, a complex plan A, B, C, right, in your designs versus just this is the plan, follow it and execute it perfectly. That's why I worry a little bit, I think, about the disconnect between the NFL level and the player level and the ability to relate to the players, and will he be able to truly bring out the best in? Because I think you have to know how to bring out the best in Geno. Geno's, I think he's got very specific skill sets, but I wouldn't say he's a plug and play guy that you can just put in any offense. And while I don't think there's a ton of differences between, well, actually Penix might be obviously more athletic. Overall, I'm not sure how similar their games are. I've gotten the impression it's not super different, but
Penix has a rocket arm. He he has trouble when he's pressured. He reads defenses really well. He's got an absolute rocket of an arm. They talk about accuracy issues, but he's actually really, really accurate. I'd say Geno is a better scrambler. Geno is probably a little more accurate and has like half the arm strength of Penix. And when you see Penix throw the ball, it looks like the way the ball came off of Michael Vick's hand. It's that he throws with that much velocity. But I think if you see a Ryan Grubb, I think you see a different type of quarterback. They're going to ask more of Geno to throw the ball deeper, I think, at times. What is interesting to me is I think multiple approaches work in the NFL, right? And I hear you as far as having to have option routes and be able to read defenses in a certain way. But I also think that there are ways to disguise what you're doing that aren't just adapting to the coverage in the moment, right? I remember Tom Moore, the old offensive coordinator in Indianapolis, would talk about how they would run the same formations almost all the time. They made everything look the same pre-snap, and post-snap, it was, things were really different, but it was the way that they fooled defenses was they didn't give anything away pre-snap because they were always coming out in, 11 personnel basically, or 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, 1 back, and it would look the same every time, right? And so I think there are different ways to disguise, but I hear you. It was a very much let's lean on the athleticism of Rome Odunze and the rocket arm of Michael Penix in order to win these games. But I don't know. Maybe I'm biased because I was so close to it and watched it a lot, but I love the idea. Have you heard any other candidates out there for offensive coordinator?
The top 2 have just been Grubbs and then Tanner. His last name is Ingstrand.
Yeah.
So that's the other guy. And I will say, I feel like I like both options. So there's no option that I'm like, oh no, that's a terrible idea. Like that's awful.
Like Dan Quinn.
Right. What Chip Kelly, what is it? Chip Kelly?
Yeah. Oh, Chip Kelly and Dan Quinn would have been taking us to the senior citizens home.
Yeah.
Not down with that.
That's tough if you're a Commanders fan. Woo.
Right.
But so I haven't heard anything like that. So I think I'm just encouraged again with the process and that they're looking at these intriguing options. There are questions to both. I think I think there's not a guy you're going to get with like true NFL play calling experience. I think it's going to be somebody you're going to take a risk on anyway. And so if that's the case, I'm not going to be upset at either of these choices. It's just a question of, honestly, I think their decision might depend on how they view Geno. It's a good point because, like you said, I think if it is Grubbs, ultimately, while they found a way to work with Geno, I think long-term Grubbs will want to have his own guy, especially coming from college, want to work the system. Geno doesn't exactly fit that style of offense as much that he might want to run. While if you get a Tanner Engstrand, sorry, my guy, I keep forgetting how to keep mispronouncing his name, but if you get him, he's worked with Jared Goff, who is really similar, I think, in Geno, except for Geno, I think has a better ability to read defense. I feel like you really, if you want to take advantage of Geno's skill set, putting him in the position to do pre-snap adjustments and those types of things really put you in an advantage. And having a coordinator that works well and can bring that element out of Geno might show that maybe they want to really give it a true shot with Geno being the guy, which is possible. I mean, I know he's older in age, but also we all know he spent like 10 years on the bench. So there's an argument that he's quite a bit of legs left in him. Training camps didn't kill him that much, I'm sure, over the years. So I think that will be, right now, we've only got two real known options. But either way, I think will speak to a lot about how they see the future, the quarterback, and the future of the quarterback. Do you think that we'll see the Seahawks try to draft a quarterback early as kind of the heir apparent to Geno? You think that's something they do this year? What do you think I guess what I'm asking is what's the mindset of the organization and the kind of the developmental curve of Mike MacDonald and the end? When do they peak, right? So are we going to pick a quarterback this year, develop them? Geno Smith is the bridge for the next year or two, and then it's time to go for the Super Bowl year 3 of Mike MacDonald? Or do you think we're all in right now because this defense is so good, potentially under Mike MacDonald, that we need to try to win now and we're going to worry about the quarterback later? I think it will have a lot to do with their quarterback, their offensive coordinator choice will tell us some of that. I really do. But I think the best, not knowing right now what the offensive coordinator is or who that is, I think their best option probably is to organizationally develop behind Geno, just because, I don't think you have to keep Geno more than a year. And I don't think you're going to find a better option than Geno this year. So because of that, from an organization perspective, Geno's staying a year no matter what. Now, we can argue the year after that. I think it's more of an appropriate of a conversation. But right now, you don't have a top 10 pick. There's no way you're going to get one of the top 3 quarterbacks. Given they're doing this whole best player available strategy, I'd be very surprised if they went with a quarterback early. As in that first round, I'd anticipate maybe second round, third round, something like that. Something where it makes more sense, where it's not a reach. Because if they did a first round pick, if they pick somebody in the first round, unless somebody fail, it'd probably just be like a reach, right? It's not the best talent available, but it's a need, right? And we're emphasizing that. Because of that, I lean that they're just going to develop somebody first, second round pick, third round pick. John's got a history of doing that anyway. Like with Russ in third round, and then see where that goes. I wonder
I do wonder, again, it's going to sound biased. I'm trying to say this as objectively as I can. I wonder what the relationship was between Mike MacDonald and JJ McCarthy.
Mm-hmm.
McCarthy, and I know people are critical of McCarthy because Michigan was so run heavy, and you haven't really seen him have to throw the ball 35 times like he might have to in the NFL. But I'm telling you, 5-star recruit, great leader. He might run a sub 4.5 40 at the combine. It would shock me if he was under 4.55. Rocket arm. They've talked a little bit about his arm strength, but they haven't asked him at Michigan to air it out. I think he's an incredible quarterback prospect. I know Jaden Daniel won the Daniels won the Heisman. I would consider McCarthy in that same area as him. He's a quarterback that I'd be overjoyed if they took him and developed him under Geno. But I do wonder because McDonald is so connected to Michigan and was the D coordinator when McCarthy was there, if there's a connection there. I also think if we see Grubb as the OC, I think there's a real possibility that Penix becomes that pick and Penix sits on the bench for a year and takes over after Geno's done. Those two quarterbacks, as a fan, I would be super excited to see either of those two drafted with that mid-first round pick. But I know that I'm in the minority in that sense because, there are a lot of Seahawks fans that don't like McCarthy. But I'm telling you, he's a real deal. He was a 5-star recruit, the number 2 quarterback in the country for a reason.
Call it ignorance on my part, and it very well might be. But in my initial research, and I am just really just starting to get into, looking at the film of some of these guys just so I can be ready for the draft and be informed. I've liked what I've seen from Jason McCarthy too. Like I do know that most Seahawks fans hate him. I don't completely yet understand why. I'm only seeing good qualities in terms of a developmental quarterback. I mean, obviously, I think he's not, your franchise guy, but I see a lot of qualities in terms of a 2nd round pick or a 3rd round quick pick that I like over others. But again, I'm new, I'm green, so perhaps that's just my ignorance. I'm sure many Seahawks fans will tell me that I am just ignorant, but I kind of side with you on that one. Now, the only thing I'll bring up with the Penix thing is I think there's a direct contrast where if you go get Penix, given his age already, that he'll already be 25, I think that'll put it much more strain on him, or it's much more of a disadvantage to sit a guy like him for a year under Geno. And so then I think you really have a QB competition because the fans are going to most certainly push for Penix. And then you sort of have a real QB competition on your hand. And how does that affect both guys? How does that affect Geno? How does that affect Penix? Could be negative all around. But if they go Grubbs, then I can't disagree with you that it's a real possibility. But I think if they go with Grubbs, I think it speaks to their mindset on the quarterback. It's possible that Geno gets benched early to play Penix just from pressure, outside pressure. And, if Geno flounders under that kind of pressure, which he may or may not, but he might.
Right.
Does that go well? And then you put all your eggs in the Penix basket. I don't know. I'm not big on a 1st round guy.
I'd see. Okay, so Seahawks Twitter, Seahawks fans, people are so, and I think draftniks in general are so hung up on Penix that they've added 2 years to his age. Because I've heard people say that he's 25 more than I've heard people say that he's 23. He's 23.
I think he'll be 25 when he plays, if I'm not mistaken.
So he's 23, born May 8th. So he'll be 24 when the season starts.
But would he be 25 if you sat him for a year? I think that's where that's coming from.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. By the time he actually gets on the field, he'll be
25 years old. So
25-year-old rookie, basically.
Right. You still have, I think the bigger question with Penix to me is the injury. So he's had he's torn his right ACL twice.
Right.
And he's injured his right shoulder. He's left-handed quarterback. So he's injured his right shoulder. He's a super tough dude, right? Like he can take a hit. He just doesn't use his legs the way he did earlier on in his college career. And I understand that there's a concern with his knee, but in this day and age with the type of medicine, are we really thinking that an ACL is going to end a quarterback's career? He may not be as mobile as you want him to be, but I don't think his mobility is what's gotten him to this point in the first place. It's his left arm, right? I don't know. He, to me, is would make so much sense in that I don't think the Seahawks are thinking Super Bowl 5 years from now. I think they're thinking Super Bowl 2 or 3 years from now, right?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, you got Penix right in his prime. And if he's gonna sit a year, then start, that second year of him starting 3 years from now is kind of that window that you're looking at trying to win. And if he's physically not perfect, that's probably going to be his peak, right? Yeah. So I don't know. I'm excited about all the ideas. If the Seahawks just said, you know what, we're rolling with Geno and we're putting all the resources into building up our lines. We have great skill players. Let's go sign us a linebacker. Let's get us another safety. And we're going to try to win in 24. I'm good with that. You bring in Penix or McCarthy or someone like that, and we're trying to win in 26. Hey, I'm cool with that too, as long as we're developing in the right direction. I think it's all good right now. All good.
It is. And that's really what the refreshing part is because really, especially we're talking about the offense wouldn't, the problem with this team, the offense wouldn't, not to say the offense wasn't flawed. It had issues, most certainly, but I think given the circumstances with which the offense had to overcome, those issues are understandable. An O-line that is essentially a turnstile, a quarterback that gets hurt in the middle of the year and sort of trying to play through that. I think that was a huge factor. And I think the O-line probably being the biggest factor there out of anything, because that was constant all year.
Well, you know him coming from Baltimore and coming from Michigan, if he has any impact on personnel, he's going to say, don't be giving me these bad linemen. Let's not wait until the fourth round to invest in the line of scrimmage. He's going to say, we need to control the line of scrimmage now, right? Yeah. And you had, even if it's Grubb or it's your boy in Detroit, I forgot his name, England or Ergstein or
Engstrom,
parboiled egg, whatever his name is, they got, so that Detroit line, both offense and defense, is what won for them, right? At UW, that offensive line won the best offensive line award in the country. Michigan won the same thing 2 years ago. So MacDonald and whoever he potentially brings in as the OC, those guys are all believe in controlling the line of scrimmage first.
Yes.
And so I do think that, we're going to see if the Seahawks go boring and they spend those first 3 picks on offensive, defensive line, I'm good with that too. Right. But I think we are going to see a philosophy shift in terms of prioritization of the line of scrimmage and bringing in, not that, Charles Cross was number 9 pick overall. I get it, but really prioritizing controlling the line of scrimmage at all times on both sides of the ball. And that's the football I love.
I think the biggest question is depth. Really, I think they've got some good pieces that they just need to stay healthy. But because there was such a dramatic drop off from your starters to your depth, and I called that at preseason, I said this is the worst depth. You go around and you look at the other depth charts. This is the worst O-line depth in the league. No,
you don't like Jake Curhan? That's your boy.
Look. I liked him. I did like he had some promise early on, but my guy cannot pass, protect, to save his life.
Or some Stone Forsythe?
No, I could never get behind Stone. Stone feet Stone. He can't move his feet.
It was a statue. Statue at right tackle. The name fits, right?
Man, I called it at the beginning of the preseason. I said, this is the worst depth. Now, I did not know at the time that depth would have to start for us for most of the year.
Oh, I know.
That's really the unfortunate part, because I really, like you said, they got some good. If Abe Lucas can get healthy, he just had surgery, which is encouraging to me, because I was worried that it was just going to be a chronic thing.
Right.
So hopefully that surgery really does fix what this issue has been, why he didn't get surgery earlier. I don't know. But Anywho, he's got surgery. Really hope that helps make a difference for him and his ability to stay on the field because I think he's a star. I really do. Charles Cross, I'm not sure if he'll ever be Pro Bowl level.
I
Seems to
think he
still
will be.
struggle with some things. Yeah. But if you can draft a guy to push him,
Mhm.
right, then you might get a better Charles Cross. I mean, they haven't had any real competition to, if I'm Charles Cross, why? I mean, other than just being motivated for the game, why would I work on small technique things? I mean, I got the job, right? And
I think he was hurt too, though.
yeah,
I
he
think he
played
was
hurt.
hurt, and I also wonder, was the offensive line coach, coaching him up in the way that was necessary? And this is just a hunch, but my impression of Mike MacDonald is he's not going to put up with bad coaching, right? He's not going to put up with lazy coaching. He's going to bring in technicians. That's the kind of dude he is, and I think that we're going to see improvement across the board because of it. Are they going to re-sign Damian Lewis, do you think? Because he's going to command a pretty decent salary, right?
I don't know. I think I was never sure if that was a Pete guy or a John guy. We're gonna find out.
Real
We'll find
quick,
out quickly. I'm not
right?
sure what kind of guy he was. I could see a world where they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, I will say, I think Andrew Dickerson was a good O-line coach.
Mm-hmm.
He got a lot out of that group
Sure.
when he had nothing to work with. He had nothing to work with. And I remember the previous offseason, really going into this season, during training camp, people really talking about the impact that Andy Dickerson had on
For
them,
sure.
the teaching techniques that he was using. I really think that he was more ahead of the curve, but
Mm-hmm.
was just given nothing to work with this year. I mean, I can't blame that on him at all.
Right.
Especially like you said, because I do think that Charles Cross wasn't fully healthy,
Right.
even when he was playing. I'm not sure though. I think again it's going to come down to the offensive coordinator, the style that they want to play, because we begin to move in the direction of after the drafting of Damian Lewis, we started drafting these more mobile guys, these more
Athletic.
agile guys. Do they continue that trend, or do they just go back? Do we go back to just having man eaters and
Right.
just push
Right.
forward? What's more beneficial if you're looking for just big strong guys to push, then I think you keep Damian Lewis. But if
Mm-hmm.
you are moving in the more zone, we need you to be able to get to the second level faster. We need you to have faster feet
Mm-hmm.
type thing, like Shane Waldron was trying to do. Then no, he doesn't come back. But it's
Well,
all style that they want to play.
that's some of the disconnect, though, right? You got Lewis and Bradford. Bradford is huge, right? You got Lewis and Bradford as your starting guards, but you want your guards to get to the second level. It's like you got to have the personnel to fit the philosophy. And I don't think that was really ever the case as far as the offensive line goes. I agree. I think the fact that the O-line coach is being sought after by other teams now that there's a coaching change in Seattle, says something about his skill.
Yeah.
I think there was I don't think Shane Waldron did the personnel any favors, right? By being as erratic as he was with play calling and being, not having I always say this, but a defined identity and philosophy. Are you linemen want to know, are we running the ball, or do I need to, is my mindset pass pro? Are we just a road grader type of offensive line? But it was always kind of wishy-washy with that identity. I don't know. I think now the McDonald's in place, the OC choices is going to have so much to do with what type of Seahawks team we get to watch next season.
Oh, for sure. And I'll say this. I think they were more pass pro. I don't think there was a question about that. I think they were clamoring for them to run the ball. So I don't think there was a real question about that part. But in terms of your split with the types of personnel on O-line, I suspect, we'll find out. I suspect that had more to do with Pete versus John than anything else. Because you're right. Bradford doesn't fit what we thought was a trend of these more agile guys who could move their feet.
Right.
He was the opposite of that. Right. Was that a concession to Pete? It's my guess. Yes. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's John who wants the road graders. But John's always seemed to be the more innovative guy,
right,
in my opinion, and Pete's always wanted the more physical, brute strength type of guys. It's just been my impression. So my guess is Bradford was a Pete guy,
Right.
as was Damian Lewis. And
makes you wonder too, is with this OC choice, it feels like the Seahawks are trying to go in this like incredibly innovative direction, right? You brought in the most brilliant defensive mind, young defensive mind really in the game.
right.
And which is such the opposite of what Pete became eventually.
Yes.
Are we going to do the same thing on offense, and we're just going to become like a think tank like some of the other organizations are, where it's up to Schneider to bring in the right talent, but it's up to these dudes to scheme in a way that makes us just better than everybody else, right? Like that's exciting. To me, they're clearly looking for the most brilliant minds in the game to come in and be the coordinators, which is, I don't know, it's so different than what we have come to expect from this organization. I don't ever remember the Seahawks being on the cutting edge of anything other than seeking these biggest, strongest, fastest dudes out there.
Well, I'll say this. I am a Sean Waldron apologist because I think he gets way more crap than he deserves, especially because people were talking about there was literal conversations about worrying if Shane Waldron was going to be a head coach and we lose him the following offseason. And now all of a sudden everyone wants to act like Shane Waldron never did anything for the Seahawks organization. It's crazy to me, but whatever. I digress. My point that I want to get to is really, I think Shane was starting to implant elements of that. I think his use of the tight ends was brilliant. I think his ability to make the Seahawks even a little bit competent at screens was I consider that innovation, to be honest. And so I think that the offense is closer to that. And so I'm not as big on, in fact, I think depending on who his offensive coordinator is, that part might rub me the wrong way because I really felt like they were moving towards innovation. Now, I think Shane Waldron struggles with situational I think he's a great play designer more so than he is a play caller. And situationally, you saw that come to bear, right? Some crazy things called at specific times. But I think his design was innovative. And there was, before, I'd never heard anybody compliment play calls before. But there were times when listening to the broadcast where the broadcaster would go, that's a brilliant play design, right? And so for me, that let me know offense moving in that direction, defense was moving backwards. So they were just absolutely going into the Stone Age. So now that we know that the defense will be elevating, in my opinion, I don't know how much more innovation we need. We need some, but I feel like more than anything, we need somebody who's good situationally, who can build on some of the good things that had already been moving in the right direction. And I hope we don't get somebody that wants to scrap everything, because I really think some of the things about that offense were very quality stuff.
For sure.
And they just need to accent their personnel better. I think our offense is the number one thing that I'd say was missing.
What do you want to see? I guess if you had your choice, what type of offense do you think would fit? So assuming MacDonald makes this defense a lot better, right? And it's what he's been hired to do. What type of offense or style of offense do you think fits the defense that MacDonald plays, and what would you like to see as someone that follows the Seahawks?
I like the West Coast stuff for Geno. Now that of course assumes that Geno's still the guy, but I like the West Coast offense for Geno. I think you get him a better O-line, and I think you find better ways to put his wide receivers in different positions. I think you more intelligently call your situational plays, not calling screens on like 3rd and 19, stuff like that. And I think you get a totally different offense. I think the offense needed a few tweaks to get over the hump. They were a top 10 offense the year before, like when Geno had his amazing, like his breakout year. We've seen the offense be elite before. They fell off, and I think that's for a number of factors. But I like the West Coast offense that they were running. I think it accents them well. I think, but what I don't want to see is, I don't want to see us go back to the road grader guys. I think against your Shanahans and against your Sean McVays, I think you need those mobile, agile guys. That's why I said I don't know if they bring Damian Lewis back or not. In fact,
Mhm.
to me, it'd be more encouraging if they don't, because maybe, I know we still got Bradford, but somebody had to be able to get some penetration at the line of scrimmage because nobody else could run block. And Bradford seems to be the only guy who can apparently do that.
Right.
Him and Damian Lewis, sort of. But I think you just got to find guys who can. I think that's where the league is going. More motion, more getting to the second levels, more pulling of guards, more agility. And I hope whoever it is, if nothing else, I hope they continue to push in that direction, even if it's not West Coast offensive concepts. I don't want to just line up at the A gap or B gap and just be like, run. Like I don't want to I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to go back to.
Right.
So whoever can build on those elements, I think I'm good with.
So I think that, we have seen run game innovation really come to the forefront the last couple of years. First, it was Shanahan with some of his concepts, and then obviously McDaniels in Miami really doing some different stuff with speed. What I find, so the real question for me is how much say and control will Coach MacDonald have with this offense and what the offense looks like, right? Because we were under the understanding that John Schneider is picking the coordinators, and this is part of why he and Pete Carroll got into it so much. So, but Mike MacDonald, again, I go back to his history. He came from Baltimore and he came from Michigan, and those two places are like ball control. And I know that Baltimore has opened it up from a pass game standpoint this season, but it's still about controlling the ball. It's still about not turning it over. It's still about being a really great run blocking team, right? And it was certainly that before, under Mike Nolan, when he was the O coordinator there, they ran the ball all the time. Michigan, we know, is that way, right? That we want to run you over every game. We're bigger men than you are. And so my question is, if he brings that mindset with him, which I expect him to, even Georgia, well, he came from Georgia before being with the Ravens. Right. Even Georgia plays that style, right? Bigger, stronger, faster, run you over. If he brings that with him, do you think that impacts the OC choice? And then does that impact the style of offense that we see? You and I always have this laugh about offensive philosophy because me, I love it. And I don't care if it's the Mike McDaniel, scheme, all kinds of crazy runs and have, A-Chain who runs a 4.25 carrying the ball, or if it's I've got a 240-pound running back and I'm running him, up the middle and off tackle 26 times and you can't stop me. I like both of those. But I do wonder if he's going to bring a run heavy sort of philosophy with him. And if he does John Schneider let him do that?
I think in terms of offensive philosophy, John Schneider is going to give him free reign to make the decisions he feels like. Because John talked about a partnership, so I don't think John's trying to be. I think he was asked about how it'll be to get final say.
Right.
John's response was that it's not about final say for me; it's a partnership.
Right.
So I think that there's going to be an open dialogue. But you would know this more than I. So I guess it's really more of a question to you. How you describe Grubb's offense? That ain't that.
It's the opposite.
Right. So I think that answers the question more than it does.
Sure.
More than it does anything else.
With Grubb, it was like we're running the ball because we know we have to, and we're just trying to loosen you up a little bit really what we want to do is chuck and duck, right? Like it was very clear, at least with this last year at UW, They were trying to take deep shots. Everything was like, let's do this so that we can take a deep shot. We're doing this so that we can take a deep shot. We're throwing this tight end screen because we want to take a deep shot next. Everything was about, passes that were 18 yards and further down the field. And on the side, and a lot of them were on the outside. Part of it could be personnel. They had 3 probably first or second round wide receivers. And a great pass blocking line and a quarterback with a rocket arm. So maybe I'm making too many assumptions based on 1 year, but I'm telling you, everything was like, it was almost like a drug. Like they couldn't stay away from wanting to take those deep shots because it was so fun. But that's who Grubb was last year. Honestly, that's kind of who he was the year before that too.
So then I lean no. So then I lean no, and that's not to say that he's not open to that. But if you go based off of the 2 candidates that we've heard of right now, and while that doesn't mean everything at all, or it really could mean nothing, it seems like passing now. Yeah, because he's the passing coordinator. I was going to say the Lions, they did have
they run the ball
run game, but I mean they're getting the passing game coordinator. So
right.
That again speaks for itself. So yeah, I lean no, even though I think fundamentally they will be intentional about how they pick the linemen and the skill sets of the linemen. I think you might see that philosophy of at least faster and stronger. I don't know about bigger. I don't know if they'll value big or not. Sometimes smaller can work to your advantage than some of these more modern era schemes. That'll be a question, but I think that you'll still see them approach the line of scrimmage with the priority. It would surprise me. I agree with you. It would surprise me if you didn't see that be a little bit more of a priority, because I get the sense maybe John kind of wanted to go in that direction too.
Right.
Emphasizing that a little bit more, but I don't know if you will see that executed heavy run game in scheme. Right. I think that Mike always probably will want to have the option to go to it. Like I said, it's in his blood, right? Where he's been around, you need to be able to run the ball. But I'm not sure that wanting to know that you can run the ball is the same as wanting to lean your entire scheme into running. In fact, I would say it's the opposite, because he talks about being so versatile. I think you see more them wanting to focus on guys who can do both. You might guess. Not wanting to lean so heavy into one or so heavy into the other, because that kind of seems to be his theme. If there's an identity I've gleaned from him so far, it's that multiplicity is key.
Right.
And so
counterpunch.
It can't just be one way or the other.
The ability to counterpunch, right? The ability to okay, you're doing this. His ability to make adjustments has been phenomenal, right? That's what everybody talks about. I just pulled up the Ravens offensive line. They weren't huge, right? Morgan Moses was 6'6", 330, their right tackle, but he's older, and so he's going to put on that weight. But like Kevin Zeitler's a technician at guard. They drafted their center, Linderbaum, in the first round out of Iowa, 6'2", 305, right? Yep. I think that it's interesting. There, if he brings any of that with him. Michigan's the same way. Michigan's not they're trying to run you over, but they're trying to run you over with athletic linemen and be able to pull, not necessarily have a bunch of 350 pounds. It's not Alabama, right? It's not trying to run you over with size. It's being technically sound and being able to pull. So I don't know. We're trying. I'm digging for all kinds of clues. There might not mean anything at all because he didn't make the personnel decisions, certainly on offense in Baltimore. But it's so exciting and so interesting to try to anticipate. This team is going to look nothing like what we've gotten used to. It might be the same names, some of the same names of the stars on the back of their jerseys, but this team is going to be this identity is going to be completely different. And like you said, Pete Carroll's like the dude who was the coach when you took the Seahawks on as yours. And it's just, I don't know. I see these pictures of MacDonald with the Seahawks hat on that people have made, and I'm like, that that's it's just totally different. I don't know. I'm spontaneously combusting right now, but I'm just excited. I'm excited.
Yeah, he really is different. And I'll end it with here. To end to the point of multiplicity, I think, and not leaning one way or the other. One, I think it's going to be more mysterious for us. But also, I think I lean that that's going to be his direction. And I loved when he said this. He said, we want to be a team that's aggressive, but we want to have answers. Right. And how many times have we wondered, where are the answers? Like, why can't we seem to respond to these punches that we keep getting, no matter what the offensive coordinator is, no matter who they are? We need to have answers. And in order to have answers, you have to be multiple. You have to be able to go away from something that is a strength and maybe do something that's not as much of a strength for a game or two. You have to be able to do the opposite, like lean into your strength, right? And have that be your answer. So it's exciting, man. I agree with you because of his philosophy being based in, I'm going to call it the answer / adjustments. It seems to be that's his big thing. And you can't swoop me off my feet any more than you can with those words right there, man. Those are key, and it's going to make every personnel decision that they make one way or the other. I think we're going to all try to overanalyze it. Of course. And I'm not sure that in the end, to be honest, I think we're going to do all this analyzing just for the heck of it. And I think that we'll all be wrong about how it looks on the field. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, because I think he's the kind of guy who can have a game plan that looks one way this game and completely shift it out for another. Like for the 49ers, what I understand, they never actually blitzed that much. They just did simulated pressures. But for that 49ers game, they came at it and were completely away from their normal tendencies, which is what I think like stunned the 49ers, is because they weren't doing anything tendency-wise that maybe they could have prepared for. And boy, do I love a sneak attack. So anyway, it's going to be fun to have him. What do they call? I think I've heard them be called the Shanna Handler. It's a small sample size, but he really did all those offenses really well. And it'd be fun in a division where you need that somebody to handle that tree because it's getting out of hand. And it really could truly give the Seahawks an advantage, because while the 49ers have had the best roster, I felt for some time now that the Seahawks should be more competitive in regards to that hierarchy than they are. They should be splitting games. At least. No way, in my opinion, should they have gotten swept by both teams. Right. This year, I think this team's too talented now.
Agreed. I agree. Whew. It's going to be fun.
It is.
It already is. It's going that week one to be a Seahawks fan. Boy, it is. With the amount of talent on that defense and offense, for that matter, plus new energy, breath of fresh air, intensity, leadership, scheme, adjustments. We don't ever say adjustments, right? And we get to say adjustments now. Oh, boy. It's on. It is. It's on, and Candace, I can't be more thrilled because, I was gloom and doom about this offseason. I'm like, it doesn't matter anyway. Pete Carroll's nothing matters. We're going to end up in the same place next year. Right. The exact opposite of what I anticipated. So I can't be happier than what I am right now. And I think they are moving in a good direction. You never know how these things turn out. We could look back 2 years and they could all be a disaster. But I still appreciate the process. And no matter the outcome, you can still respect the process. And I think that's really all we have to go on right now. Yep. Well said. Well said. All right, Tino, tell people where they can find you. Apparently you've been busy with baseball and such. So tell people what's going on. Yeah, so been going off. Mariners Cast, at Ethos Mariners, did 2 of them on Monday. Did one to react to the Dylan Cease rumors. And then that day they traded for Jorge Polanco, who I've been calling for 9 months now. Super exciting. So you find me on the Mariners Cast through the Ethos Network. Also doing a lot of fantasy baseball stuff on my own YouTube channel. I think you can access it. Just look up Valentino Ganasius. But I'm doing a lot of my positional ranks right now, doing a lot of minor league baseball stuff. Just, I don't know, sports is my life. I love it. And tons and tons of baseball on the way.
Nice. YouTube Tino. I didn't know that was a thing. All right.
On occasion.
All right. That's cool. Be sure to follow the show at Ethos Seahawks. We'll have all your updates here as we get things, personnel decisions made, offensive coordinators made. We'll be here to react to it all. And we'll try to do something for you for the draft. I did mention before that we may not be able to do that, but with the help of Tino, I think we might be able to pull something off for you guys as we get closer and closer to the draft date. In the meantime, guys, that's all the time we have for today. That's it. And as always,
go Hawks.